Man, y'all don't like wading through the mud or what? It really is. It's good to see y'all here. I didn't expect anybody to come because I figured it'd take you longer to get here in your canoe than when you drive. So it's good to see you. It really is. I'm going to continue today in this series I've been in about choices. And we've been talking about the life of Joseph. And it's pretty interesting. He's one of my favorite characters in the Bible, and it's really interesting on how his life works out and how it turns out. But last week, do anybody remember what we talked about last week? Y'all should know this by now. I was going to give you a test. Is it about choices? That's good. Last week we said that we have a choice to either become our circumstance or to become who we were created to be, and we get to choose that. The problem we have, most of us choose to become our circumstance, and that's why we find ourselves in the position we're in. And one of the things as we were going through is that Joseph didn't live down to his circumstance. He lived out true to who God created him to be, and even while he was sold into slavery, and even while he was in Potiphar's house, he was blessed by God. And what Potiphar saw was that as Joseph was blessed, his whole house was blessed. So even though Joseph wasn't in his destiny, God's blessing still followed him as long as he lived true to who he was, as long as he served God. So today I want to pick up in the story where we left off last week, and this story takes place in Genesis chapter 39, which is where we're at right now. So if you got a Bible, you can turn. If not, sorry about your bad luck. You just have to trust me. Now, Joseph, this is in verse, halfway through verse 6. How's that for? This is like 6.5. Now, Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. Much like myself, I understand that the struggles Joseph had to deal with. So as he's working in Potiphar's house, now remember, Potiphar had put Joseph in charge of everything that he owned. He was the overseer of everything Potiphar had. And it says this, that after a time, the master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Behold, because of me, my master has no concern about anything in the house, and he has put everything that he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except yourself, because you are his wife. How then can I do this wickedness and sin against God?" So Joseph is being tempted by Potiphar's wife because she finds him very attractive, and Joseph, he pushes back against her and refuses to be with her, refuses to sleep with her, refuses to acknowledge her in a romantic way. And he does this because he says this would be a sin against God. It's funny that he said a sin against God and not a sin against Potiphar, but Joseph got that he was to live out God's will. Now what happens is Joseph stays strong to the will of God. He follows the will of God. He makes the choice that no matter what temptation is thrown at him, he chooses the will of God over the circumstance, right? So as Potiphar's wife comes on to Joseph, he keeps pushing back against her, keeps saying no. Well, one day, he gets caught in the house, and all the other servants aren't there. And she really comes on strong. Like she makes her move, right? And such an aggressive young lady tears his clothes off, like his coat off, or his outer garment, his outer shirt off, and he flees, he runs. Well, then she starts yelling, and as Potiphar's other servants come in, she tells them that he raped her. Bad news, right? So she puts Joseph's clothes in her bed and tells Potiphar when he comes in that Joseph had raped her. Now, Joseph wasn't doing anything wrong, right? He was doing the will of God, and God's blessing was following Joseph. But all of a sudden, Potiphar comes in. She tells him that he raped her, and Potiphar has him thrown into prison. He gets thrown into prison with all of the king's servants who had displeased the king. It says here, let's see. Verse 19, as soon as his master heard the words that his wife spoke to him, "This is the way your servant treated me," his anger was kindled, and Joseph's master took him and put him into prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was in prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love and gave him favor inside of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in the prison. And whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. And the keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed. All right. So, it seems to me that as Joseph makes these choices in his life, to walk in the will of God, that the favor of God follows him, right? But would you agree that this is not Joseph's destiny? Right? This is not what he had dreamed in his heart. Remember, the dream of his youth was that he would rule. And not only that he would rule, but that he would rule over his people. And now he finds himself sold into slavery, a slave at Potiphar's house. God's blessing follows him there. And as he's starting to have life again and breathe again, he gets accused of something that he didn't do and finds himself in prison again. To which we would say, that's not fair. How many of you guys have ever heard, that's not fair? If you got teenage kids, you heard, that's not fair. I was going to name Justice, that's not fair. Her name is Justice, so I do believe with all my heart that our names mean something still to this day. And Justice means just one. And what it is a seeker of righteousness or justice. And so she is caught up heavy in what's fair and not fair, right? And Justice would say that this is not fair. Joseph wasn't doing anything wrong, yet he still finds himself in prison. Now, here's my perspective on this is that, man, this loser Potiphar, what's this guy's deal? Because like Joseph had made his life a breeze. And at first accusation, without any evidence or anything, what does he do? Throws him into prison. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Women, boy. Now it's Joseph. It's just the way his life's going. It seems like it's going bad and going bad and going bad. And every time it starts to get good, it takes a turn for bad again. Now, how many of us have experienced this thing in life where we feel like we're finally getting on our feet? Like everything's finally working out. We're starting to see light at the end of the tunnel. We're starting to be able to breathe. And then all of a sudden, man, the rug gets yanked out from under us. Does that not happen all the time? And our first things are, man, that is not fair, right? We went through this really hard time here in the church, and man, it was bad. And things started getting better. And as things started getting better, man, it was moving. We were starting to see life, and it was really, really vibrant and growing. And God had shown me some things, and man, they were just like everything was working out. Like we were actually could see what God had placed in us starting to come to. And then Chris died. And I mean, he was a huge part of what was going right here. Trust me. And I told Brandis this week, I blame everything on Chris. And I always will, because he can't defend himself. I blame it all on him. It's all his fault, right? It's not fair. But here's what happened for me, and this may happen for you too. When that rug gets yanked out of you and life isn't fair, man, I got really angry at God. I mean, I was really disappointed in God. I didn't understand why God would set us up like that for failure. I didn't understand why God would take what was happening and destroy it and crush it. I didn't understand that. To me, it wasn't fair. And I was very angry at God. And I'll tell you, the honest truth is that I did not believe Him. Maybe you've been there. I mean, that's a hard thing to say, right? To say, you know what, God, I've read your word. I see what it says, but I've seen it in action and it doesn't work. And man, the anger and the frustration and the pushing away. And so what happened was, when life became unfair for me, I wasn't like Joseph. I chose bitterness. I chose anger. I chose disbelief. You could say I lost faith in God. I lost faith in prayer. I didn't see the point. Like praying's like talking to the air, talking to a wall. What's the point? It doesn't matter anyway. God's going to do what He wants to do, so why do it? I mean, it got bad. Like, I had these real hard conversations with God, and He didn't talk back. I did all the talking, you know. And man, I just didn't think it was right. I just didn't think it was fair. How, and especially how God could show us His vision and show us His dream and like, I didn't ask for that. I didn't ask for that vision, that dream in my heart. I didn't ask for those desires, but He put them in me. And then I start moving that direction and He yanks the rug out from under me. So, like, maybe you can see where Joseph's situation turned. I mean, like, he was doing, like, I'm sure that he was like, okay, God, you know, my vision you put in my heart when I was a kid, who I thought I was going to become, maybe it's not working out, but, you know, this is a pretty good gig you got me in here, and I'm all right with that, and things are starting to turn, and things are going good, and I can see your blessing, I can see your hand. Then He yanks the rug out from under him again, and after the second time, man, you start to say, wait a second. Because the first time you're like, really, here's how it worked for me. The first time, it's like, man, Satan is kind of waging war against us. He wants to destroy us, right? And the second time, it's like, wait a second, where's God? Because you kind of shift. Now, you may all not be like me, but I would bet more of you are than you'll admit to. I bet a lot of us have had, even if we didn't have the guts to say it out loud, a lot of us have had those feelings like, man, I just really don't know if I believe any of this. I remember going through this time where I was like, am I crazy? And I mean that. I mean, I was seriously questioning, am I making all of this up? Is this all just in my head? Like, are we buying into this big conspiracy or lie? Is God even real? I mean, I don't think you really know God if you've never asked those questions. Like, if you don't find that place, man, I don't really know if you know the God I know. Because, like, we have this kind of relationship that's real. So, day by day, as I begin to heal and begin to let go of some of the anger, some of the bitterness, Like everybody knows God forgave us, right? Like we've heard that since we were little kids. God loves us. He forgave us. You ever thought maybe our biggest problem is we haven't forgiven Him? And you're like, does God really need forgiveness? Forgiveness is a real funky thing, man. Like, I don't know if you ever had to deal with forgiveness or not. Forgiveness is a really funky thing because forgiveness isn't for the person, it's for you. Forgiveness frees and releases you, where bitterness imprisons us. So did God do anything that he needed to be forgiven from? Well, from my perspective, He did. The truth is, God does what God wants to do because God is God and I'm not. And I don't have to understand His ways. The Bible actually says you won't understand. My ways are way higher than your ways. My thoughts are way higher than your thoughts. I have a big picture. I have a big plan. I know what I'm doing and you don't. Which is frustrating for control freaks, right? Any control freaks? Yeah. I know there's 50% control freaks because, like, in a marriage, one is and generally one isn't. So, like, that's the way it happens. So, the ones who won't admit it, you know, you can go to meetings for that. Control Freakers Anonymous. But when I made that choice to forgive God, it released me. And at that point, I began to be able to see, you know what? I still have a life. I still have a dream. I still have a vision. That God has still given me this identity of who I am in Him. And just like Joseph had that identity of who he was. Now, I don't know how that all worked out. Okay? I love reading the Bible, but I've also come to realize the Bible has a lot of snapshots. Because I guarantee you, the day Joseph got thrown into prison, he wasn't like, oh, it's all cool. I'm good, man. I'll forgive everybody. Y'all are so awesome. Praise God. Praise Jesus. Right? No way. Dude, this guy was a human being. You realize these people in the Bible are real? We catch the snapshot, right? We know how it turned out, but we don't know how long Joseph was like, man, God, what are you doing? I don't believe what you showed me and what you told me. Maybe I made it all up. Maybe your dream for me is all in my head. Right? We don't like to look at Joseph that way because he's our hero. But man, there is no human way possible that he didn't doubt something when that's going on. And what I'm trying to tell you is we have reactions and things that happen as we navigate the world, right? We suffer loss. We suffer obstacles in our lives. We get broken. We get tired. We get hungry. We get worn out. We make mistakes that have consequences, and we always eventually have to deal with the consequences of our actions, don't we? Everybody, human beings are all the same that way. Some of us, though, realize that this isn't healthy, this isn't good, or the fact is that I have only one life to live. YOLO. Right? YOLO. You only live once. Right? And we could spend that life in brokenness and bitterness and paying the consequences of our actions, finding ourselves wrongfully in prison, maybe, rightfully in prison, maybe. I don't know. Maybe we had loss like I suffered, like we all suffered. We all suffer loss. Everybody's lost somebody, right? Either in a broken relationship or in a death or in a move or some way, something that was secure in our life got broken. We've all suffered those losses. And human beings are created and made to grieve. There is a time when we hurt, when we get broken, when we get wounded. There is no other cure sometimes except time. Being a pastor, man, everybody thinks I've got some kind of magic word when we suffer loss. You go to a funeral or we lose somebody, and it's like, man, we need to call the pastor because he'll come in. And this is the thing I struggled with the most when I started in ministry, is like feeling that obligation of having to have something to say. I'm usually not at a loss for words, by the way. But what I found is there's really nothing you can say at those times. Time does heal all wounds if we allow it to. So I would say the in-between verses. Like, do you realize we covered the time Joseph went to Potiphar's house, from the time he was in prison and everything was working out good there, in one chapter? Man, if you only wrote the highlights of your life, you could get it in a chapter. I guarantee you. That's not to put you down. I'm just saying, most of us aren't that great. Don't have that much to write about. So we miss some in-between stuff, and we think, man, if I was just like Joseph, well, be careful what you wish for. Right? I mean, read on. This is not like what he would have planned. And you see this through all these characters of the Bible. So as you're reading the Bible, you got to remember, man, we're getting snapshots. A lot of snapshots in the Bible. And most of the snapshots we're getting are like on these high times. But we got to remember, time passed. Weeks, months, years. Are you telling me I have to grieve sometimes for years? Yeah. You realize this whole thing that's going on in Joseph's life up to this point was probably over 20 years? Man, if it don't work out with us in 6 months, we're done with it. Right? How many of you guys are going to put up with this for 20 years? All we got is one day he was put in a pit. The next day he was sold into slave. The next day he was in charge of everything. The next day he was put in prison. The next day he was in charge of everything. $5 days? We catch 5 days over 20 years and we think we know the story? I bet over the last 20 years you had 5 pretty decent days. Right? My question for you today is, what are we going to choose on the in-between days? Because it's what Joseph chose to do in the in-between days that made the 5 days, right? YOLO, you only live once. You only live once. And so we go back to that same choice. I can choose today, I can choose to remain in grief and anger and bitterness and brokenness. I can choose that. Or I can make a choice to move in my life toward who I'm created to be. And I can tell you Joseph made that choice. It doesn't say that Joseph went to prison and then made the choice to continue to serve with all of his might just the way he did in Potiphar's house. But I know that happened. You know why? Because if he stayed in anger and bitterness and unforgiveness toward God, God's blessing wouldn't have followed him. He would have been walking outside the will of God. But instead he walks in the will of God, and Joseph's blessing, God's blessing on Joseph's life, follows him into the prison. And the prison guard puts Joseph in charge of the prison, and then he no longer has anything to worry about. And he sees that Joseph is making prison better. You get that? Joseph made Potiphar's house better. Because he walked in the will of God. He was true to who God had created him to be, right? Instead of walking and becoming his circumstance. Then he goes to prison and he made prison better. He could have been his circumstance, right? Would have been easy to just sit on a rock and say, you know what? You put me in prison, I'm done with you, God. Done with you. Which I probably would have done that like day one. I mean, if we got real with ourselves, I know it's hard to do, but like I think about, I always stick myself in the Bible. I don't know if you guys do that. But I'm like, I'm sitting in prison after being falsely accused of something I didn't do. I'm bitter. Like, I'm bitter. And I'll tell everybody about it. And you know what I found in my life is when I'm like that, other people are like, yeah, me too. And then they're like, and have you noticed how bitterness and anger and unforgiveness and basically that starts to consume you and all the people you're around? And you make life worse for everybody? Have you noticed that? Or maybe somebody around you that's doing that to you just man, this is this, and all of a sudden you're like, yeah, me too. But see, that's not the point of becoming a Christian. That's not the point of Jesus giving us life. That's not the point of the reconciliation of God and man, where God and man walk in one relationship, a known God walking in our lives, present daily in our lives. See, the kingdom of heaven is about those people who realize their need for God and move toward or choose the will and the ways of God for our lives. And we've made this whole Christian thing about us, like Christianity in the way its doctrine is taught today is the most self-centered, self-consumed religion in the world. But that was never the intention. It was never the point. See, God moves and consumes us with His life so that we can be a blessing. Do you realize that? Our job as a follower of Jesus and being radically changed and having God dwell in us and us dwell in Him is that we make life better for those around us. The blessing should follow us. And everyone who we are around should be blessed. Your boss should try everything he could do to keep you at his company, because as long as you're there, the blessing should follow you. But do we live that way? Or do we choose a different way? Do we say, it's not fair, I deserve to be here, or I deserve to be there, life's not fair. They're not treating me fair. And so we get bitter and we get angry and we get live in unforgiveness, and all of a sudden there's no blessing with us. And instead of making life better for the people we work with and the people we journey with in our lives, we become Debbie Downer. We become that thing, that cancer that gets in and starts to spread. See, that's not what we were meant to live for. That's not how we were meant to live. My word for you today is that we get to choose. We can wake up and realize, and this is what I went through, no matter how mad I was at God, no matter how bad I felt like He jacked me, I realized that I could choose life or death. I realized that I still could make a choice to lay down my anger, my bitterness, my hurt, to give it to Him, to forgive Him so I'm released and free. Or I can just remain in this state and live the rest of my life hurt, in grief, broken, and bitter. See, at one point in your life, you have to wake up, and what I realized was, I'm not dead. I lost my friend, but I'm still here. I'm still alive. And I can either live this life and let the blessing of God follow me and make the most out of it and become who God created me to be and walk toward it. I'm not going to say you're going to be there overnight, right? I didn't say that. What did I say? 5 days and 20 years. So far, went to the end of the story. You realize Joseph's story is like a few chapters in the Bible, 40 years. A 40-year story. I'm not saying you get there overnight, but I'm saying we walk toward our destiny. We keep moving forward. We let go of the things that are killing us now, and we realize that we have a life to live. And we can choose to live that life today. And the more days we choose to live that life, the better our lives are going to get. We're not going to choose it every day. If you choose it every day, man, good for you. None of us are that holy. We're just glad to be in your presence today. You know, we hope some of your greatness can rub off on us. The rest of us, though, we'll take 2 steps forward and 1 back. But we're still moving, right? We're still getting there. And that's the whole thing, man. We have to make that choice, and we have to make it every day. And if we become aware that we're making these choices, then we'll make them more often. The problem we have is that generally we're unaware of the choices we're making. All we ever sense or feel or pick up on are the results. If we wait for the results, how much have we lost? If we're proactive in our choices and proactive in our decisions, then the results will speak for themselves, and you'll start picking up momentum and you'll start picking up steam. And I'm telling you, man, I'm telling you this, and I want to tell you this with a big exclamation point. You will pick up steam and you will pick up momentum and you'll start moving, you'll start going, and then it's going to happen again. Right? I have never, ever seen a mountain that didn't have a valley on both sides. I mean, there's a rule there, right? For every mountain, there's 2 valleys. Well, I don't like valleys. Well, you'll never see mountains. We just have to know they're coming. And as long as we understand how life works, and we're proactive in our choices, and we realize that we only live once, and that we get up today and we do the best we can do today, and we get up today and we make life the best we can make it, and we walk in the will of God, and we do as God instructs us and tells us. We move our lives toward the will of God, and those around us become blessed by the life we're living. Then we're moving deeper and deeper into the kingdom of heaven. And it's good, isn't it? Think about the greatest time of your life, the highest mountain you've achieved now, and think how awesome that was. Maybe you're there now, man. It's awesome. We all want to be around you today. We want some of that. But what I found in my life is that every time I rightly respond to the valley, the next mountain is bigger and better. But for every big mountain, there's a bigger fall, right? A bigger disappointment, a bigger letdown. The more you invest into people, the bigger chance of getting hurt, the bigger chance of suffering loss, but also the bigger gain. Now, we can all sit in a valley and just sit there and be ticked off and look around and go, man, these mountains for all these people, that's not fair. But if you want the mountain that other people have, you got to do what they did to get it. You can't just sit around and be jealous and go, man, wish somebody give me a mountain. If you want that life, do what they did to get it. You want Joseph's life? Do what he did. You want Paul's life? Do what he did. You want Jesus' life? Do what he did. Do what he did. We want We want the mountain without the valley. We want to do and get everything in life, but we don't want to put in the work. We don't want to suffer the hurt. We don't want to suffer the risk or the chance. We don't want to put ourselves out there, because you put yourself out there, you can get hurt. Right? We've had people hurt us. I'm never putting myself out there again. We'll say that, man, I'm never doing that again. I'm never letting anybody that close again. That's fine. Just know that you chose to live in the valley. Just know that you chose that life. And you can't sit around and whine and gripe and complain about how your life's going nowhere when you're the one who chose to stay in that place. But if we choose the life of Joseph, then we choose to do what Joseph did. Then we give our all, and we become all invested and all in, and we put everything we have into that life. And I'm sure that Joseph didn't notice things turning. You ever notice how slow the process is? It wasn't like the jailer walked in and goes, "Hey, Joseph, welcome to prison. You're in charge." I don't think that's the way it worked. Day by day, he did his job. He wasn't running around going, "Hey, look at me, I'm going to do this. Hey, look at me, I'm going to do this." Just did his job. Every day he became who he was. He walked out his destiny every day. And what people around him started taking note. "Hey man, you really want something done right, get that Joseph guy. Man, you're really looking for some blessing on your life, get around that Joseph guy. He's contagious." Day by day, and all of a sudden, someday, prison head takes note. "Hey man, I noticed that everything this guy touches turns to gold. I want him on my team." But it wasn't overnight. See, you can't just do one random act of kindness and go, "Well, where's my mountain, God? Come on, I've done my part. I gave to the church last year. Where's my blessing, God? I bought a cupcake." It doesn't work that way. You have to invest daily, all the time. You always have to be invested. You always have to be locked in. You always have to be making the choices, making the decisions. As long as we do that, we're going to be moving toward that destiny, toward that place of blessing. Now remember, prison guard head wasn't Joseph's destiny. But I guarantee you it was a lot better than sitting on a block in a cell whining. Making an impact, making a difference. And he ends up getting out of that and moving on. We'll talk about that later. I want you guys to stand with me. Hopefully today that you've heard something that you can take with you. Hopefully you're encouraged today. Hopefully we'll all start making better choices, and that individually we will start making the lives of our lives and the lives of those around us better, and it'll get contagious and it'll start to move, and the kingdom of heaven will start to grab and start to advance. And that's our prayer for us today.